Here's why Daenerys turned mad in Season 8 inches of Game of Thrones. When Game of Thrones reached its final season, one of the most shocking and divisive turns in television history unfolded before our eyes. Daenerys Targaryen, the breaker of chains, the mother of dragons, the woman who had spent 7 seasons freeing the oppressed and vowing to build a better world, suddenly embraced the very tyranny she once fought to destroy. Her descent into what many called madness sparked outrage, heartbreak, and endless debate among fans. How could the woman who freed the slaves of Meereen and executed tyrants become the very embodiment of the cruel fire and blood her family name warned about? Why did Daenerys Targaryen, the woman who once said she would break the wheel, end up burning King's Landing to ash? To truly understand why Daenerys turned mad in Season 8, we have to explore not just the events of that season, but the journey of her entire character, the legacy of her family, and the devastating losses that shaped her final decisions. Daenerys Targaryen's story begins in exile. Born during a storm on Dragonstone and fleeing Westeros as an infant after Robert's rebellion, she grew up across the narrow sea with nothing but the name Targaryen and the constant reminder from her brother Viserys that they were the rightful rulers of the Seven Kingdoms. From the very start, her identity was tied to the idea of reclaiming a throne she had never seen. But unlike Viserys, who embodied cruelty and entitlement, Daenerys discovered compassion and strength. Her early seasons showed a young woman who wanted to protect the innocent and free the enslaved, who believed she could create a better world than the one she left behind. Her famous titles, Breaker of Chains, Mizza, Mother of Dragons, were earned through acts of liberation. She wasn't just a conqueror, she was a savior. To millions of viewers, she was the hero destined to sit on the Iron Throne. But even in those early seasons, the seeds of something darker were quietly being planted. Daenerys's victories almost always came through fire and blood. From crucifying the masters of Meereen to burning the Khals alive in Vaes Dothrak, her sense of justice was absolute and often violent. She justified her actions by pointing to the cruelty of her enemies, and in most cases, audiences agreed with her. After all, the masters were slavers, the Khals were rapists, and her enemies were tyrants. When Daenerys used dragonfire, it felt righteous. But these moments also revealed a core belief that would eventually lead to her downfall: the idea that she alone knew what was right for the world, and that anyone who stood in her way deserved destruction. The Targaryen bloodline carries its own ominous warning. Every time a Targaryen is born, the gods flip a coin, the saying goes. One side greatness, the other madness. Generations of Targaryens struggled with mental instability, paranoia, and violent tendencies. Her father, Aerys II, famously became the Mad King, obsessed with wildfire and willing to burn his own people alive to maintain control. Daenerys spent her entire life hearing stories of her father's cruelty, and she swore she would never be like him. But the tragedy of Daenerys is that in her quest to be different, she followed a path that echoed his in chilling ways. The Targaryen coin toss isn't about simple genetics, it's about the intoxicating combination of absolute power and the belief in destiny. Daenerys had dragons, armies, and the unwavering faith of her followers. And as she achieved victory after victory, the line between justice and vengeance began to blur. By the time Season 8 begins, Daenerys has faced loss after loss. Her journey is marked by triumphs, yes, but also devastating betrayals and heartbreaks. She lost Khal Drogo, the man she loved and the first person who made her feel truly powerful. She lost Ser Jorah, her most loyal protector, to disease and later to death on the battlefield. She lost 2 of her 3 dragons, first Viserion to the Night King and then Rhaegal to Euron Greyjoy's scorpions. Each dragon was more than a weapon, they were her children, living symbols of her destiny. Losing them was like losing a part of herself. And perhaps most importantly, she lost trust in those she loved. Her relationship with Jon Snow began as a rare spark of romance, but when Jon learned the truth of his parentage, that he was Aegon Targaryen, a legitimate heir to the Iron Throne, everything changed. Jon's very existence threatened her claim to power, and though he professed loyalty, his honesty with others undermined her confidence. For a woman who had spent her life surrounded by betrayal, this felt like the final crack in her armor. Isolation is a key ingredient in Daenerys's descent. In earlier seasons, she was surrounded by advisors who challenged her, people like Jorah, Barristan Selmy, and Tyrion Lannister. But by Season 8, many of these voices were gone or diminished. Jorah died at Winterfell. Tyrion, once her most trusted hand, repeatedly failed her with poor strategies, and his loyalties were questioned. Varys, who once claimed to serve the realm, secretly plotted to support Jon as king. Daenerys, once the breaker of chains who inspired love and devotion, began to feel more and more alone. In her mind, the people of Westeros would never love her the way the freed slaves of Essos once did. She was a foreign queen in a land that looked at her with suspicion. Let it be fear then, she tells Jon in a haunting moment, accepting that if she cannot rule with love, she will rule with terror. The turning point comes at King's Landing. After defeating Cersei's forces and ringing the bells of surrender, Daenerys sits atop Drogon and surveys the city. The Lannister army has dropped their weapons, the civilians cry out for mercy, and the throne is practically hers. But instead of accepting victory, she gives into rage. In a single, devastating decision, she unleashes Drogon's fire on the innocent people of King's Landing, burning men, women, and children alive. It is the moment Daenerys fully embraces the idea that her vision of a better world justifies any means, no matter how horrific. This is not madness in the clinical sense, it is a chillingly rational choice rooted in her belief that fear is the only way to create lasting change. For Daenerys, the destruction of King's Landing wasn't senseless, it was a message. She wanted the world to know that resistance was futile. The tragedy of Daenerys is that her fall was both shocking and inevitable. Throughout the series, she often spoke of breaking the wheel, of ending the cycle of power and oppression that defined Westeros. But her methods increasingly mirrored those she sought to replace. When she burned the Tarlys alive for refusing to bend the knee, some viewers began to question her ruthlessness. When she threatened to burn cities that did not surrender, others dismissed it as bravado. Each step down the path was justified in the name of justice, until justice became indistinguishable from vengeance. By the time the bells of King's Landing rang, Daenerys had convinced herself that mercy was weakness and that fear would ensure the peace she longed for. Her father once planned to burn the city with wildfire, she fulfilled his dream with dragonfire. Her relationship with Jon Snow also plays a crucial role in this transformation. Jon represented love, acceptance, and the possibility of ruling together. But when he discovered his true heritage, he unintentionally became a threat. His refusal to return her romantic affection, combined with his sense of duty to tell the truth about his lineage, left Daenerys feeling betrayed. To her, Jon's rejection wasn't just personal, it was political. If the people of Westeros knew there was a male Targaryen with a stronger claim, her dream of the Iron Throne could vanish overnight. When she realizes that Jon will not keep her secret and that he cannot return her love in the way she desires, it cements her belief that fear is her only weapon. The loss of Missandei, her closest friend and confidant, is another critical blow. When Cersei executes Missandei and her final word to Daenerys is, Dracarys, it serves as both a farewell and a call to vengeance. Missandei's death is the last tether to Daenerys' humanity. With Jorah gone, Jon distant, Tyrion unreliable, and Varys plotting behind her back, Missandei's execution leaves Daenerys with no one she trusts completely. Alone and grieving, she turns to the one constant in her life, fire and blood. It's also important to consider the symbolic weight of Daenerys' actions. Throughout the series,